Hey friends, this is Jackie Luqman, one half of Luqman Nation, and welcome to the latest edition of Live and Coffee Current Events and Politics in Luqman Nation, the most dangerous show on social media anywhere. Uh, just me tonight. We've had a really busy and kind of hectic, chaotic weekend. We are here in Lukman Nation kind of preparing to self quarantine, contain, whatever it is. Neither one of us are infected with the coronavirus. Neither one of us are sick with the virus. We do not think we have come into contact with anyone who has the virus. We're just being cautious. Um, not sure what's going to happen here in Washington, D.C., the belly of the beast. I understand that our mayor, the mayor of this city, neoliberal darling Muriel Bowser, has declared that all of the public schools, I think, are closed starting tomorrow for 2 weeks. Sunday services. She implored that church services should not be held today. We were going to go to church today, but we had a little emergency with our dog Brewski, so we weren't able to get to church. But and the reason we were going to church was because we were going to connect with some members of our faith community to organize a check-in and delivery runs for our elderly and sick and shut-in church members during this crisis. And I was on a call today with one of the organizations I belong to, a local organization, Pan African Community Action. Um, we're organizing a community aid effort for people in this area of the city. There will be more information about that you will see circulated around. Um, yeah, this is it's stressful because I don't remember living through anything like this, so it's a little freaky. I will admit. We are erring on the side of caution because we are not the kind of people who believe that this is something that we take lightly. I have to admit, excuse me, that when this was first announced, when it first surfaced in China, I didn't think it was a big deal because I didn't understand that it was more serious than the flu. Even though it is a strain of the flu, it is just a more aggressive strain of the flu. Um, or rather, it is a more aggressive strain of uh, the coronavirus. There are different strains of coronavirus. And I will admit, I had to apologize to someone who has a lot more knowledge in virology than I do, has a background in medical science, and who understood how serious this could be when the outbreak first happened in Wuhan, in China. And I'm thinking, oh, that's all the way in China. It's nothing but another strain of the flu. Thousands of people die from the flu here in the United States every year. People don't make a big deal out of it. And like I say all the time, folks, the Lukmans are not always right, and we don't have a problem admitting when we are wrong. And I got this wrong, and I apologize to my friend Kenda, who fully understood this when it first um, surfaced in Wuhan. And so, yeah, we are taking this very seriously. We went on the typical supply and grocery store run yesterday. Morning, went to Costco, stood in a line that wasn't too terrible, got into the store pretty quickly, got most of the things that we needed. I come from a family that is some members of my family might as well be preppers. So And I grew up in a very much in a culture of preparedness because my grandparents lived through the Depression. So we always had extra food on hand. My grandmother had her own garden, and it was actually a big garden, um, where it was a subsistence farm, but we raised our own pigs for a time. We had some cows at one time. When my mother was younger, they had chickens, and they processed their own meat. They sent their own meat to the slaughterhouse. They had a smokehouse, where they hanged their own sides of beef, and they slaughtered their own chickens. They hanged their own sides of pork, and smoked and salted their own pork. And so I come from a family where my grandmother canned her own vegetables. And when she passed away in 2018, there were still jars of like canned green beans and pickled cucumbers and pickled watermelon rinds, that she had canned 10 years ago. My grandmother had a 5 foot long and probably 3 or 4 foot deep freezer that when she passed away was stock full of food from one end to the other, from the bottom to the top. And she has been gone from this plane for 2 years, and we are still eating food out of that freezer when we go home to visit. I mean, so I come from a family of people who understand the value of preparing for the worst. So now I've lived through, I'm living through this kind of disaster scenario, and Abdus and I have been talking for a while about, we need to set aside a space in our house where we set aside where we can stock up on some extra food. We have to, make sure we have extra water. We have to make sure we have extra dry goods, and, we have to get a generator. We talked about these things, but never really felt the urgency to do it. We knew we were getting closer to that urgency as climate change became more and more real, but nothing moves you to act on that kind of stuff like um, being in the middle of a global pandemic and facing the possibility of having to be quarantined in your home for a couple of weeks, and not being able to move freely about in crowds of people for fear of coming in contact with somebody who is infected with a highly contagious virus that most healthy people will survive, yes, but there are some conditions that will exacerbate the death toll of this virus in this country. And I'm going to talk about those conditions in a minute. But first, as I went through that lengthy preamble, and I'm sorry, I realize how dirty my glasses are. I apologize. So let me clean my glasses real quick so that I can see if I can say hello to our friends. What's going on, Plum Jade? Over on YouTube, and let me see who I can see on Facebook. Excuse me, if I can. Oops, sorry about that. Doo-doo. Chanel and Jesse on Facebook. Appreciate it. Appreciate y'all watching. Please share this video. Let me see if I can. Yeah, oh yeah, great. I can see you here on the screen. This is the new setup I'm having to get used to here over on Facebook. So yeah, a couple of things we need to talk about with the U.S. response to coronavirus. Now, we all knew that the system in this country for healthcare delivery is inadequate at best. And honestly, to be real truthful, it's shitty. It's crap. We don't have a health care system in this country. What's going on, Maurice? How you doing? Your dad is upstairs making mashed potatoes for dinner because he has been so wonderful. I have dragged that man back and forth. He hung out with me in Costco for what 3.5 hours yesterday. Um, we had the issue with the dog this morning that freaked us both out. Um, and he's been putting away groceries, like more groceries than I think we have ever had in this house since we have been married. And he's tired. I'm tired. We're both very concerned about you all, Maurice, in up in New Jersey. So yes, your dad is going to give you a call later on. Make sure y'all all right. And we're going to call his dad. Make sure he's all right. Um, for those of you who wonder why I'm talking to one of our viewers like that, Maurice Johnson is my husband's son, and so yeah, we are. I hope my brother Cleophas hops on in a minute, because yeah, we need to check on our family anyway. We love y'all, but yeah. So listen, as we know, we have a shitty healthcare system in this country. We don't have a healthcare system. We have a death care system. That's what we have. This health delivery system in this country does not exist to provide adequate access to quality health care for all people. It exists for the health providers, the medical providers, the pharmaceutical companies, the medical equipment companies, obviously the health insurance companies. It exists for them to make money, the healthcare system in this country. Um, and it exists to provide quality health care to people who have the money to pay for those services. That means that poor people do not have access to quality health care in this country. Poor people have access to um, stopgap measures to keep people from, I don't know, dying right now. But health care is not something that poor people in this country really have access to. People who have decent jobs, who are fortunate enough to be provided health insurance that their company subsidizes, have a little bit better health care, a little bit better access to health care in this country. But most people who work in this country don't have those kinds of jobs. So we live in a country um, that literally provides access to quality health care only for people who can afford it. And for everybody else, if you have access to health care, it is because you have a decent enough job that provides it or that subsidizes it for you. So the level of quality um, of the healthcare you get is contingent upon how good of a job you have in this country. And I know a lot of people will say, well, the ACA helped millions of people provide access to health care. That's true. It provided health insurance for people, for some people who were uninsured, but it still left 20 to 30 million people uninsured. But it also penalized people, assessed a tax penalty on people who opted out of health insurance, largely because people couldn't afford some of the plans. So so we don't have a system of healthcare access in this country where every human being in this country has access to quality, affordable health care. We don't. So, what we really have, like I said when I began this, is a death care system. We have a system that manages when people will die, contingent upon what their level of access to health care is. Now, we're all going to die because we're human beings and we're all going to meet our end. But depending on how much money you have, what kind of job you have, which affects the level of health care you can get in this country. If you have a treatable disease, how soon you die from that treatable disease is contingent upon how much money you have, what kind of job you have, and what level of access to health care you can get to manage that disease. That's the kind of healthcare system we have in this country. And if most people didn't realize that, if people believe that the American healthcare system is the best in the world, then there is no way you can look at the U.S. response to this viral outbreak of this coronavirus and see this system of healthcare or death care as anything other than what it is right now, because this is what's going to happen in regard to people who are exposed to the disease, or to the virus rather. So if you notice, most of the people who are exposed right now in the United States to the virus are people who are wealthier, people who have traveled, right? And then so there are people who've had the money to travel. So they've come in contact with people who have the virus in other countries and they've brought that virus back here. And you would think, okay, well, that limits the to a bunch of rich people. Which a lot of people would be like, all right, fine, poor people are pretty much safe. Well, that's not entirely true. When you consider that wealthy people are able to self-quarantine because they have health insurance, so they're able to take that time off work, or they're able to work from home because their job provides that. So they are able to self-quarantine without losing any money. It doesn't hurt them. They have paid time off, right? So they're not going to lose a paycheck. They're able to get tested because they have enough money to access some service where they can get tested for the virus. But by the time they've gotten tested for the virus, they've already come in contact with a bunch of people who can't afford to take off work if they're exposed to this virus, because they're hourly workers at the airports that they flew into. They're hourly workers on the cruise ships that they were on, that they brought that virus back onto when they were exposed to that virus at the port of call where they caught it. They've exposed hourly workers at the fast food places that they went to when they came back before they realized they were sick. They exposed hourly workers who were at the grocery stores and the pharmacies that they went to when they came back from their trip where they were exposed to the virus before they knew that they were exposed to the virus, before they got sick. So this is the kind of situation where, yeah, wealthy people who are exposed to the virus because they traveled overseas and they encountered somebody who had the virus, but there was a window of time where they came in contact with people who were not wealthy, who provided food service, who provided hotel service to them, who worked in grocery stores, who came in contact with them, who could be infected. And a good case of this, a good example of this, is what happened in Utah, with the Utah Jazz, the basketball team. two members of the Utah Jazz were exposed to the coronavirus. Those two members um, tested positive. There is no way to know how many of the staff at the arena where the Utah Jazz play. There's no way to know how many of those people those two players came in contact with. But we do know that one of the players was messing around, playing around, thinking, oh, it's no big deal. And he touched the microphones and the other belongings of the other players, touched the microphones of the reporters and touched the belongings of the other players in the locker room and infected those people. He had no idea he was positive. So think of all of the people who clean up the locker room from the Utah for the Utah Jazz. All of the arena staff who clean up, who go pick up the laundry, the towels, the uniforms. All of the cleaning people who clean up the locker rooms after the people come and pick up the laundry. All of the people who work in concessions. We don't know how many of those people came in contact with those players, but we do know that all 58 members of the Utah Jazz were tested, and they were only all able to be tested so quickly because they're rich. Because they're rich. Because from what I know of so far, no members of the arena staff where the Utah Jazz play have been tested. None of the cleaning crew, none of the concession staff, none of the people who directly come in contact with the team members. I could be wrong. Somebody update me if my information is correct. It is incorrect rather. But none of those people who came in contact with the team got tested, but all 58 members of the team got tested. That's a serious disparity in prevention of the virus being spread based on who's rich and who's not. And that kind of disparity is happening all across the country where there are not enough test kits in each state, in each city to test every member, every citizen in the state. But you let one of those elected officials, you let the mayor of a town get sick, the mayor's immediately tested. You let the governor come in contact with somebody who has the coronavirus, they're immediately tested. But the millions of citizens in their state, there's no testing for them. So we immediately see the economic disparity between the rich and the poor simply in how testing for a highly contagious virus is conducted in this country. There's no way for us to know how many regular folk have been exposed to and are now positive for the coronavirus. There's no way for us to know because there simply are not enough tests to test the population of every state right now. And the virus has been in the United States for 2 weeks. All of the reports from all of the smart people in science and medicine are indicating that the number of infections that are going to be reported is going to increase exponentially as each week passes where the population is not adequately tested. And just last week, there was a question as to whether the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, was going to provide tests to the population for free. These people were going to make folks pay for these tests. And I believe that there's still a possibility that might happen. So we already see that we don't have a healthcare system for everyone that provides adequate health care and adequate access to health services for every citizen in this country. Just looking at how the testing for this virus is being done and who is able to be tested immediately and who has to wait. That's telling us everything we need to know about who this healthcare system in this country serves. There is a healthcare system for the rich, and a death care system, a death management system, I guess, if you want to be more accurate, for the rest of us. That's the number one lesson, I think, that comes from the response to this virus so far. All of the demonization that was committed against China last month as they implemented quarantines to contain the virus, to keep it from spreading so swiftly outside of Wuhan. And it was a situation where, you don't know that you have a bunch of people sick with a contagious virus until a bunch of people are sick with a contagious virus. It's just something you don't know you have that's a problem until the problem presents itself. And by the time the problem presents itself, with enough people for you to recognize that it's a problem, some of those people have already gone outside of the area that you need to contain. Because viruses don't really give a shit about your borders, right? Viruses don't care about the fact that you live in this province, in this country, among these people. Viruses are going to spread wherever human beings go. So there was no way for China to completely contain the virus, but they did what they could. And in the United States, because this government is committed to demonizing countries that have socialist programs and central governments and socialist delivery of healthcare and education and a strong safety net that provides for its people, because this government wants to convince you that socialism is evil and it kills people. So they had to make China out to be this evil, authoritarian, brutal regime, when China was quarantining entire provinces and telling people to stay home, and using the army to make sure that people stayed home and didn't leave Wuhan. But China was able to contain the virus so that a few weeks ago, the number of newly infected people were going down drastically. But they were authoritarian with their quarantines. But see, China was able to quarantine the people in Wuhan because they provided health care to the people in Wuhan. The Chinese government paid for clinics to be stood up in the affected provinces to treat all of the people in those provinces for free, to test and treat all of those people for free. China built entire hospitals in weeks to treat sick people in the provinces for free. The government paid for it. Is that going to happen in this country? How? How is it going to happen in this country when this government had to be made to promise, sort of, that every citizen is not going to have to pay for the test, that every citizen is not going to have to pay to be tested for the virus? There not going to be any hospitals built to meet the demand that the existing hospital infrastructure in this country can't meet. for all of the people who are going to become infected and get sick from this virus, there's not going to be any new hospital built. The government's not going to pay for that. This government is going to pay for that. But they're going to tell you that countries like Cuba, that has provided interferon treatment to other countries like China and Italy and Iran, where Iran, the United States, is sanctioning and has been sanctioning for 40 years, to the point that Iran develops most of its own medicines, up to 97% of its own medicines, but it cannot produce the test kits that they need because they can't get some of the materials that are needed for the test kits. Why? Because the United States has been imposing sanctions on Iran for 40 years. So when the United States is spreading this propaganda about Iran, about, oh, Iran is building mass graves, so many that you can see them from space. First of all, those are probably empty graves that have been dug in cemeteries, just regular old cemeteries, not because there are thousands of people that have died from the virus. And there are hundreds of people who have died from the virus in Iran. But understand something. The death toll in Iran will be as high as it will be because of U.S. sanctions. Hear me when I say this. When the United States media demonizes Iran for not being able to treat the people who will become sick because of the coronavirus, it will be because, not because Iran is an evil, authoritarian, totalitarian regime, it will be because of 40 years of sanctions against the United States government. The same thing with the United States government sanctions against Venezuela. 100,000 people have already died in Venezuela because of U.S. sanctions. What do you think those sanctions that the United States has not lifted, what do you think those sanctions are going to do when coronavirus hits Venezuela? Cuba, which just reported its first case of the virus, I think a few days ago, and it came from a tourist from Europe. That's a whole nother show, y'all. Good grief. Has developed a treatment from interferon. Now I know that interferon is not the most advanced treatment for a lot of diseases, but remember, the United States has also imposed a 50-year embargo against Cuba. So Cuba, not able to get a lot of the more modern technologies or medicines that the United States and other European countries touts they're so great at, but Cuba provides full coverage, absolute full coverage of healthcare, education, and healthcare delivery to its people, not only to its people, but to other countries, because Cuba provided Venezuela and Iran and China with the interferon treatments for coronavirus that they developed for free. They have the treatment for their people for free, and they provided it to China, Iran, and Venezuela. And by the way, you've seen in the news the lockdown and the just horrendous toll that this virus has taken on Italy. Well, Italy is a part of the European Union, and Italy requested assistance from the European Union to meet the demands for this virus a few weeks ago. The EU refused to help Italy. So now Italy has the death toll that it does. They're holding a funeral every 30 minutes. You know who sent an entire plane full of assistance to Italy? Not the United States. China. Just, I think it was Friday, China sent an entire plane full of doctors and interferon treatment and other treatments from Cuba and also from China to Italy to help them. The United States isn't helping anybody because the United States can't even help itself. The United States cannot help its own citizens respond to this virus. Now, I'm not a doomsayer. I'm not trying to freak people out here. Many of our friends and our followers, our listeners, our viewers, our family members, we have family members who are immunocompromised, who have diseases that would make it more difficult for them to recover from this virus were they to contract it. So we're not taking this lightly. We're also not trying to freak people out more than it is already a very anxious, anxiety-ridden situation with um, something that we don't know how it's going to happen, how it's going to unfold in this country. But what we do know from the way our government, this government is responding, what we do know is that this government doesn't care about us. If you didn't understand that before now, after Thursday, when the United States Federal Reserve, just like that, dropped $1.5 trillion with a T onto the stock market to stabilize the stock market now, but it took Congress until late Friday, I think Saturday afternoon, before they passed a bill to provide relief to American workers who may be forced to not work for at least 2 weeks. Yeah, this country doesn't care about you. But not only should you be clear that this country doesn't care about you because of that, I need you to be clear that this country doesn't care about you because of the deal that Congress reached. Let me show you what I mean. Now, this was published in Common Dreams. You've seen it in other places. I hope you've heard about it on the news, but if you haven't heard about it, I'm going to explain this to you right now. Congress did reach a deal to provide paid sick leave to American workers. They reached a deal to provide a relief package to American workers who are affected by the coronavirus. And last week, I gave Nancy Pelosi credit for pushing this when the White House didn't do it after they said they did. But I'm taking my credit back because it's a shit deal, and I'm going to explain to you why. The bill, first of all, the Republicans didn't want to approve the package at all because it included mandatory paid sick leave, right? Because the Republicans didn't want to approve paid sick leave. All right, they were fine with providing unemployment insurance, increasing food stamp benefits, and other things, but they did not want to approve paid sick leave. So the Democrats made a compromise with the Republicans, and we didn't know what the deal was until Saturday afternoon. We find out that the deal only covers about 20% of workers. The paid sick leave that is being provided only covers employees that do not work for companies with 500 or more employees. What that means is big companies like McDonald's and Amazon that have 500 or more employees, do not have to provide any paid sick leave to their employees if they have to close operations because of because of the coronavirus. And what's more, companies with fewer than 50 employees can seek hardship exemptions. So when the government officials say, if you're sick, stay home, you're not going to miss a paycheck, that's a damned lie. Sick workers should stay home, but there's no guarantee in this legislation that that most of them will get paid. All right? I just okay, let me show you a picture. Because I think that will help a little bit more. These are all of the companies with employees with 500 or more employees. These are the largest companies in the country. McDonald's has 517,000 workers. Walmart, 347,000. Subway, 180,000. Burger King, 165,000. Wendy's, 133,000. Chick-fil-A, 89,000. Pizza Hut, 156,000. Where's Amazon? Over here, we can't see how many. But UPS, 37,000. These are all of the companies in this country, and not even all of them, but the largest companies in this country that have 500 or more workers. None of these companies are required under this relief package that was passed by Congress. None of these companies are required to provide 2 weeks of paid sick leave to any of their employees. None of these companies. Not one. This bill that was passed by Congress does not require any of these companies to provide 2 weeks paid sick leave to their employees. Not one of them have to do it. So, folks, when the Democrats are sitting here patting themselves on the back and celebrating that they did something for the American people with this piece of legislation, they're full of shit. They are absolutely full of shit. They caved to the Republicans because the Republicans said the only way they would agree to vote for this bill was if that provision was included, that companies with 500 or more employees were not required to provide paid sick leave to their employees. The Democrats caved to the Republicans. And they are putting lipstick, not lipstick on a pig, because I don't want to insult pigs like this. They are putting perfume on a shit sandwich and presenting it to American people as if they are offering you something that's good for you. Most workers, most low-wage, hourly, part-time workers will not receive any relief from this bill if they are laid off work for a few weeks because their company has to close down in order to contain the coronavirus. And you know who that's going to affect the most? You know what the highest percentage of workers that is? Poor folks and black folks. It is unconscionable that this government could drop $1.5 trillion on the stock market to stabilize it and make sure that the stock market could maintain through this crisis. But it refused to guarantee money for workers, all citizens, to ensure that people could pay their bills, to ensure that people could buy food if they couldn't work for a few weeks during this crisis. So, what's going to happen when people can't go to work because their job is closed down? They're not getting paid because this legislation doesn't provide paid leave for all workers, and they can't pay their rent. There is no moratorium that has been issued from a state or federal level on rent and mortgage payments like has been done in other countries. Italy did it. Italy demanded that mortgage companies cease collecting mortgage payments and rent while the country is shut down while they deal with this crisis. That hasn't happened in this country, and I doubt it's going to happen. So what's going to happen when low wage workers aren't getting any money because they can't go to work and they can't pay their rent? You know what's going to happen? They're going to be evicted. They're going to be homeless. Even though some states have issued moratoriums on evictions, but when the jobs open back up and people aren't able to catch up on their rent, they're going to be evicted. And then we're going to have more homeless people, and most of those people are going to be low wage workers. They're going to be poor folk, they're going to be black folk, they're going to be Latino folk. Some municipalities, some cities have issued a moratorium on police responding to nonviolent um, incidents. So don't tell me we couldn't have always changed the way police respond to nonviolent incidents, but it took a viral pandemic. It took a global pandemic for municipalities to change the way the police respond to nonviolent incidents. Some cities have issued moratoriums on evictions. They've issued moratoriums on water shutoffs, on utility shutoffs, on power shutoffs. We could have always done this. This could have always been done. This is what organizers have been fighting for years, for decades. But it took a global pandemic for municipalities to do the thing they said that they couldn't do. So the lessons that we are learning, and we're learning them in real time, and I know that people are concerned about their own safety, and you should be. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be. You should be concerned about your own safety, because you can't help anybody else. If you know, you got to put your oxygen mask on first. All right, you cannot help anybody else if you're dead, right? So you should be safe and careful about your own safety. But as we are thinking about what's going to happen to our less fortunate brothers and sisters, we ought to be realizing how little support there is for them. And we ought to be realizing that it's intentional. This system is set up not to provide support for the people who have the least amount of money to buy into this system. We've been living in a dystopian, post-apocalyptic nightmare scenario of a society longer than we realize we have been. It just took a global pandemic to pull the curtain back, to rip the facade off of what kind of society we really live in. Now, it's 8:23 and the debate is on, and I'm sure people have hopped off to watch it, so I'm going to stop talking, um, so I can, watch also. But I swear to God, if Bernie Sanders does not use this as the case for why Medicare for all was always a good idea, I I don't know. I don't know I don't know what to say. But folks, we don't have a system in this country that cares about us. Um, I don't really care, Luther, on Blissett, whether the money was for banks or the stock market. The money wasn't for us. I don't, we, people are dying and are going to die from a health crisis that this government says it doesn't have the money to respond to, but it had the money to put $1.5 trillion into the stock market or the banks to stabilize them, but none of us are going to be stabilized. We're on our own. We are on our own. Here's a good example for you. The Federal Reserve put $1.5 trillion into the banks or the stock market just like that on Thursday. Do you know how much the student loan debt is? The total student loan debt for this country is $1.6 trillion. That $1.5 trillion would have practically eliminated all of the student loan debt in this country with the exception of $500 billion. Like that. But when people ask Bernie Sanders, well, how are you going to pay for eliminating student loan debt? I don't know. Why don't you ask the Federal Reserve why they gave our student loan debt money to the banks? You want to know how much Medicare for all would cost? $34 trillion. I think the last estimate was $32 or $34 trillion over 10 years. Do you want to know how much the bailout for the 2008 recession actually was? Not the $700 billion that was allocated in the original TARP bill, the Troubled Asset Relief Plan bill that was passed under Obama. Not just that. No. Over 11 years, by 2011, the total amount of money that was estimated to have been spent on the bailout in between the Federal Reserve, the Treasury Department, and other financial vehicles that the United States government gave to the banks and the stock market and whatever else you want to call it, $39 trillion. And that's probably an underestimation at this point because that was by 2011. It's probably more because they're still paying to stabilize the banks. So when people ask, how are we going to pay for Medicare for all? $32 trillion over 10 years? This government gave the banks and the stock market, or whatever you want to call it, this government had from 2009 to 2011 at least $34 trillion to give to the banks to bail it out. So instead of asking how can we afford Medicare for all, ask the Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department why they gave our Medicare for all money to the banks. We don't have any more time to be having polite conversations about nitpicking what this really is and what that really is. Our fucking government is giving our fucking money away to banks and the stock market and private investors, and you and me are taking our paychecks and what little bit of money we have left to try to pay our bills while we might not be able to go to work and get any money. Try to keep our lights on so we can keep the refrigerator on with the little bit of food that we have in it. We have to hoard medicine because we don't know whether we're going to be able to get to the doctor to fill our prescriptions for the next 2 weeks to a month. know if we can get to a doctor at all because millions of us don't have insurance. If we get laid off, millions of us are not going to be able to pay our rent, to pay our mortgage. We don't have time to sit here and have nice conversations about, well, no, that money was it was really given to the banks. You ought not give a fuck who they really gave that money to, because the only thing that matters is that they didn't give that money to us. And you and me and your families and my families are going to suffer because of that. So if we want to sit here and have polite conversations about where the money really went, you do that. But you and me, we don't have time for that shit. And right now, as this debate is going on, I hope to God Bernie Sanders is angrier than he's ever been in his life. Because your life and my life depends on him displaying the anger that we don't have the access to display to these motherfuckers on Capitol Hill who have taken our money and put our lives in jeopardy. So now my husband hears that I'm angry, so he's come in to remind me to calm down, get off this live stream, and come have dinner.
And I would ask this though.
Yes, Bear, baby love.
I would say what we need to ask ourselves is, why do your government hate you so much? Because it's not my government.
Thank you.
Because if it was my government would look out for my best interest.
Come on now.
But but it's not my government. It's a government that's been hijacked by special interests, lobbyists, the state of Israel, and everybody else. You can send $3 billion a year to Israel, who don't need the money,
and they have universal health care. What the fuck?
But yet, I mean, it didn't. And you know what you said. I'm not trying to hijack your live stream.
No, that's all right.
But the only thing I'm saying is the fact that, like you said, nobody had to debate nothing when it came to giving the $1.5 trillion to the banks. Nobody had to debate. Nobody had to talk. Nobody had to haggle. But when it comes to the people who actually produce the wealth of this country, then all of a sudden now, wait a minute, slow it down.
I don't know. We can't make corporations pay for paid leave. We can't make them do that. Really? You can't?
Yeah.
No, it's not that they can't. It's that they won't. They don't want to. And at this point, you know what?
At this point, and I'll say this, at this point, if we don't get out there and start putting the full court press on them, then we deserve everything they do to us.
There is no better way to end this stream.
That's right.
Other than that, right?
I mean, you might as well just go to CVS, get the grease, and give it to them. Give the grease to Mitch McConnell. Give the grease to all of them.
Yep.
And you know what? They're going to screw you. And the thing of it is that the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans, when they screwing you, the Democrats might get you dessert.
Exactly.
But the Republicans ain't getting you shit.
They're not going to tell you when they're just going to come up on you.
But they both going to ram it in you.
But they both going to violate you.
You'll get pillow talk with the Democrats. They're good for that.
They'll give you a little bit of pillow talk.
They'll give you the pillow talk. But outside
pat you on the head afterward.
Republicans is hardcore triple
Wham,
X.
Bam, thank you, man. Yep. They ain't even going to thank you.
And they're not leaving no tip on the dresser.
Listen, y'all, this isn't all the time you hear us say, and you've heard so many other black activists say, our existence is political, our skin is political. Everything is politics. I can't stand people who are like, I don't pay any attention to politics because, that's so negative. Everything is politics.
Yep.
Healthcare is politics. Vaccines are politics. Being able to see a doctor is politics. Employment is politics.
Where you live.
Where you live is politics. Where you go to school is politics. How much groceries cost in your neighborhood is politics. What kind of grocery stores you have in your neighborhood is politics. How the cops treat you in your neighborhood is politics. Every fucking thing in this world is politics. And if you are one of those people who are sitting there saying, oh, I don't pay any attention to politics, that stuff is too complicated for me, you know what you're doing? You're killing the rest of us.
Yep.
You are letting the rest of us suffer under this system where people are running it knowing full well that everything is politics because they're the ones who are making all the political decisions to fuck you and me. So all your friends and family who's sitting there talking about, I don't like talking about politics because it's too negative. How you feel, how you like your politics now? How you feel about those politics now as you're terrified about how coronavirus is going to infect you? Because you know what? Your terror and what's going to happen with this virus, that's the result of politics. So look, y'all, I'm sure that we will be all right because look, we're people of faith. We trust in the Lord, but we tie our camel too.
That's right.
So yeah, we stocked up on our stuff. We checked up on our people.
And don't even think about coming here because we got something for you. Don't even think about trying to get what little stuff we got.
No, because we ain't those kind of Negroes neither. We yeah. Take care of yourselves, but also check in on your neighbors. If you know if you know you have elderly neighbors who are close to you, and if you can help, if you can help, when you go to the store, if you have a little bit of extra, get a little bit of extra to give to somebody who can't get out. You know, we'll share some cleaning tips that were shared with us through our church members. We like I said at the top of the show, we've got a couple of we're trying to organize a couple of things for our church members and through the Pan-African community organizations that we are involved in. We encourage everyone watching to look out for somebody else too.
May I just add one thing?
Absolutely.
And this is the population that we rarely talk about, but the homeless.
Oh my God, yes.
The homeless. I mean, when you're given, when those of us, those of you who are in the habit of giving to the homeless, if you can, look, you don't have to buy hand sanitizer. I mean, it's something as simple as they have it on YouTube. Go on YouTube and look up how to make homemade sanitizer.
Yes.
And if you can, if you can afford it, then make sure that the shelters and the homeless people who you see on the street, if they're approachable, then socks. Clean
socks.
Stuff.
Yeah, somebody posted on YouTube, Plum Jade, small bottle of bleach.
Small
bottles of bleach, little packs of. Look, hit it steady. The bigger stores are stocking up as fast as they can, but they are not because the trucks are still running. Look, my husband is a truck driver.
Woo-hoo.
Stop looking down on blue collar workers because I was in Aldi and I was looking for chicken and there was no toilet paper. And I was looking for toilet paper and we actually were out of toilet paper. We weren't just like, woo, I got to get toilet paper. We actually were down to like one roll of toilet paper. And so I was looking for toilet paper and Aldi didn't have any chicken or toilet paper. I leave the store with the stuff that I had and I'm sitting in the car and what pulls in behind an Aldi? A transfer truck with supplies. So
Wall Street ain't bringing it.
Wall Street didn't bring it. The banks didn't bring it.
Yep.
A truck driver brought supplies. And what did they bring? Toilet paper. So stores are still stocking supplies. They're just not able to keep stuff on the shelves as fast as people are buying them. So our suggestion is to stay away from a lot of the large stores. Go to the smaller stores, but don't hoard stuff. Remember the people who don't have as much money as you, who are sicker than you, who are elderly, and if you can buy extra to give to somebody else, do that.
Is it the golden rule, hun? Do unto others?
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. All right, my husband is sitting here because he's made mashed potatoes and he wants me to calm down because it's been a stressful weekend for both of us. And we got to check on our folks. But Maurice, yeah, it was you know your father is a smoker, so that was a smoker's call. He
Oh,
was
yeah.
like, I heard a call. But we're okay, family. Our family is okay. We pray that you and your families will be okay. Um, we gotta fight, y'all, and we literally have to fight for our lives. If you don't see that by now, that's not just hyperbole. We're just not making that shit up. We've always been serious about that. This is a fight for our lives.
And how about, hun? This is my last little comment.
Mm-hmm.
But we're so caught up in race and class and all this stuff. But Corona doesn't give a shit.
Corona don't care.
Corona doesn't give a shit. The viruses don't give a shit. So we're reminded how more like we are
Mm-hmm.
than when we make up these artificial differences that we love to embrace.
Yep.
Corona is letting us know, like, oh man, look, I don't give a damn if you're white and you live in the Gold Coast,
Mm-hmm.
or if you're black and you live in Southeast. That doesn't care. So so we have to understand that we are each other's keeper.
Yep.
And the fact remains that your government hates you.
Hates you.
They would rather put trillions, billions of dollars in a fucked up space corps than to make sure that the workers who actually produce the wealth are safe and
Right.
have and don't have things that they have to worry about. That's the end of me.
All right, so listen, we'll check in with y'all again. Be safe. Be very, very good to each other in this really difficult time. And as always, peace if you are willing to fight for it. Because we got to fight for it, y'all. He is always going. Let me get the scene up first.
You have just heard a live stream from Jacqueline Luqman. You can catch Jacqueline Luqman on Coffee, Current Events, and Politics on Sputnik Radio, The Real News, and everywhere where her voice is broadcast around the world and in the universe.
Maybe aliens are like, what's that?